Hello internet, today we are going to see one topic from Angular, which is content projection. So this topic is really helpful if you are working on the view of a application, and many times you have to pass the HTML content from one component to another component. As you know, Angular encourages you to have a decomposability where you have to divide each of your features, each of the sections of your application into a smallest unit, and that can be easily developed, that can be easily maintainable and pluggable to an application. And this not just allow you to have a maintainable code, but also you can customize your application to any extent. So content projection is a concept that allows you to do that things. With a content projection you can pass the HTML content any view. Basically, by the view I'm referring to anything that is renderable on the browser and that you see on the web application. So with a content projection you can pass any content, any values. It can be a data or just an HTML content to another component. Now can you say that content projection is another mechanism of data passing? So we cannot say it is a mechanism of just a data passing, because what we are doing with the content projection is we are passing an entire HTML content, entire view from one component to another. So it's not like only a method like we learn about the decorators, input output decorators, and so it's not about passing a data, but it's about passing a view, HTML content from one component to another. So I have a live example that I will come to it, and I want to show you that how it's working and what are the ingredients through which we achieve a content projection. There are types of content projection that I also wanted to talk about, and I will come to this part once I will show you what is a content projection. I will introduce you with so I have an Angular documentation open, and it says that content projection is a pattern in which you insert or project content you want to use inside another component. For example, you could have a card component that accepts content provided by another component. So it's important to note that they are saying they are using a word called content. They are not saying it as a data. So what they are referring here as a content is an HTML code. It can be a CSS code also. Like at the end, it's a markup. It's a markup text that is going to render into your web application. So that's what they are referring here as a content. So with the content projection, what you can do is you can pass any markup from one component to another, and like they are telling, you can pass one card that is present in the top level component, and you can pass it to another component where you have referred it through a selector tag. Now there are types of content projection. These are single slot content projection, multi-slot content projection, and conditional content projection. So the single slot content, as name suggests, that we are just projecting only a single source. So we are projecting a content from a single source. That means I have a parent HTML file somewhere, and inside that I have referred some tag, and inside that tag I have passed some content so that my actual component where the projected content will land, that it's going to handle it. But here is like I'm just projecting that content from only a single source, not from the different sources. My parent component is the only one who's in the command here, who is telling it's a child component. The selectors which are used, it's not a child component you need to have a relation. It's like anything, any selectors that you have used in a particular HTML file, it means that you have included that particular components into your HTML file. So here the source is single, and you are passing the content from only one file. In a multi-slot content projection, what happens is your component accepts content from multiple sources. So we will see it like what are the multiple sources, and how like content can be passed from the different components or the different files. Components that use conditional content projection render content only when specific conditions are met. This is the realistic, and this is what in most of the scenarios when we develop a real-time application we need to have a conditionality where we can decide when to project a content or not. And this is really, as I'm telling, this is very practical type of content projection, and out of this I would say conditional content projection is something that you will be using if you are working on the web application. This is something you will feel a need to do this, because in a real time we have a scenarios where we have to develop a UI which is based on certain many conditions. Like you can decide on the basis of some data, or the state of application like the logged in user, his or her roles, profile, a lot of things can be there. There is an unlimited possibility. So depending on those conditions, you have to decide how and when you will project content into components. Okay, so after understanding that theory, let's see the actual example and try to understand that how it's working and how are the things in the program, how we write the code to achieve the content projection, what are the things, syntaxes we need to remember, and how basically it works. Okay, so I have an example where what's happening is there is one component, app component HTML, as you know by this time that this is the root level component in every application, in every Angular application we have. So I have three more components created, and I wrote some HTML, inline HTML inside that. That's why you can see only component.ts file. The template is basically I provided in the component file.ts file itself. I don't want to maintain a separate file because the code is very small. So like this, I have three components created, and I'm referring these three components in my app component HTML via their tags. So we'll go by each type of the content projection. We'll try to understand how it is being implemented there and what exactly it does, so that we are calling it a single, multi-slot, or conditional. We'll try to understand those things, those points which differentiate each other from, which differentiate basically these types from each other. So first one, app zippy basic. This is a single slot projection, and as I was talking, in the single slot projection you have only one source. So here you can see I have only one tag here. So this is the first side of the topic. Like we have seen before, when I pass any, like whenever I have to use any component, I use its selector. I can like go some advanced level, and sometimes I can also write the code like I will write a div class as something, and I will put a app dot zp basic like this. So this is also a type of selector, and in that case, what different thing I need to do is I will go to I need to enable this, because what as you can see, like this has worked, because uh, this is not only like, this is the most popular one, and even in my tutorials I have been showing this type of a selector, that you add any component and you create a custom tag like app -zippy multi-slot. This is a custom tag, this one I created, and the origin of this lies here. When you see a selector as this one, Angular automatically identifies that this tag created with this text, it has a selector mention in this zippy basic component ts, so it knows that, it comes here and checks for what is the template for it, and then render. Not only one way, as I showed, you can also type a class as this class, and now instead of a custom tag, I have used division tag from the HTML. So inside this, I will just revert the changes, and I want to show it with a plain way. Now I pass this p tag. So this is my first step. Okay, I pass the some content here. Now I want to receive this content and want to handle it. Now that responsibility lies in the component of the selector. So I will go to a zippy basic component, and there you can see that I have a template for that zippy basic, which says the single slot content projection h2 tag, and one additional thing is ng content. So ng content, it acts as a placeholder. It tells Angular that whatever content is going to be received in this component via content projection, it will be inserted in this place. So line number 7 basically tells whatever content that this particular component going to receive at runtime, it is going to put it there on the line number 7 and going to render it. So what happened in our case, when I pass this p is content projection cool, this text, this entire p tag landed here, and this zippy basic component basically render it on the line number 7. That's why you can see that that is content projection code has been added here, and I can still see the h2, which was the already there in my zippy basic component. Now let's see a multi-slot content projection. So in a multi-slot content projection, as you can see that there are two tags here, but a different thing which separated from the single slot content projection is, you can see that I have added one identifier, namely question. So with this identifier, Angular gives me a flexibility where I can decide the sequence, I can decide order in which I want to put a markup content that is being received. So from this app component, I'm passing a two p tags, but Now, if what if this zippy multi-slot have a need that it want to render this markup in its own custom way, so in that case, what it does, since we have added identifier, we can use this special thing called select, and we have a ng content. Basically, we need a ng content. Anything which has been received from a content projection, we need a ng content to like render it on that line. If you don't have a ng content, that components template basically don't understand that if it has received something, and it will receive something, but it will not render it, because there is nothing, like we have not added that provision in the template where we are saying that you render the content on this line. So that's why ng content is important. Now the special thing I'm talking is a select, and I have provided this identifier which was question. So with this, I'm telling a template that get a projected content for which id is a question and render it after this. So that's where I have a flexibility, my component have flexibility where it can decide how should be the order of rendering on whatever content being received. So that was a multi-slot content position. Now the interesting one, and this is the something that you will need and you should use in the real-time application, and that is conditional content projection. So in the conditional content projection, basically you will pass some content to your component, and there are conditions. Now condition, we are not only talking about a basic condition. If it would have been a basic condition, we could have solved this with the ng if you don't know about ng if is a really good directive which allows you to decide which content to render on a runtime depending on a data, depending on any condition basically. So this is a common thought came to my mind also when I was learning Angular, that if I could achieve this same with the ng if, why would I go for the content projection and add a complexity? But remember, complexity is not always bad. Misunderstanding that makes it difficult. So with this conditional content projection, it allows you to make your code more efficient. And you can see that in the example I have used another identifier which is app example cp toggle and app example cp content. Now you must be having this curiosity what exactly this means, the cp content and the cp toggle. So if I go to this file, you can find that there is a directive tag I have created. So these are the directives. I was using a word identifier for them, but in the language of Angular we call them directive. With a directive we can import some metadata, we can import some additional functionality on any tag in the view basically. There are more applications to it, and it is a separate topic actually to talk about what are the purpose of directive and when we use it. But yeah, directives are really handy, and you need to if you know the directive, you can your code will basically look very clean. Now this particular example is little complicated. You can see I have a selector which is basically a button, which means that any button tag where the directive, where the identifier is mentioned app example cp toggle, that is the select that and then apply these things, apply this custom logic on it. So what happened here, as you can see, there is a button which has a identifier app example cp toggle, and now the code I wrote here is whenever user clicks on it, the expanded flag will be turned on and off like that. So this is a host binding. This is basically method type of decorator which you can write, and through this it allows you to listen to the events happening on particular elements in your template. So same is the thing here. When this content ng content which is in the button and which has a app example cp toggle as a identifier, if it's click, just toggle this flag, just make this expanded, as in just negate this. If it's a true, make it false. If false, make it true. That's it. So, and this expanded flag is later on used in the another component where it is binded to a division. You can see that I have a ng if and there is expanded flag, and depending on that expanded, it is going to render the content inside it. Okay, so this is a little complicated to understand, but I will try to make things easy if I could. So we are good till now. Like ng if is receiving one expanded flag that is being controlled by this button, and inside that I have a ng template outlet. So till now we were like nowhere talking about a content projection. We just have one button that we projected. Okay, that's cool. We have seen that we can do it with any tag, and the same thing we did. And one additional thing we introduced is the ng if expanded, through which I'm just tracking the event if the button is clicked and clicked. That's second thing. Now the third thing, I have this ng template outlet as a directive, a special directive, and there I'm assigning a value content template ref. So it tells that inside this ng container I'm going to receive a outlet value. The outlet, basically it's similar if you know the router outlet. Router outlet is something we use it as a custom tag that we use in the case of routing, where I want to put a content which is a result of routing. If you don't know about routing, how it works, I would suggest this video. You can learn everything about the routing, and it's really interesting and fun. So ng template outlet is similar like a router outlet, but here it tells that it's a templates outlet. Whatever the things you have received from a content projection from the template, you are going to host, you are going to render it here on this line. You can see the content is something which is already there. This is the all the projected content basically lies in this object. Then it tells the template reference of it, use it there. So if I go back to HTML file, I can see not this one, yeah. So if I click on it, there is a ng template, and unlike, you can see that in the above example I just had a simple tags, p tags. I had two p tags here in the multi-slot, but here I have a ng template. Now since we use an ng template, that's why we need to have that ng template outlet. We could have done this also with a simple way, but you need to know about this approach also, where we can use a ng template. Now ng template outlet and the template reference is going to get rendered on the ng container on the line number 3. That's what is happening here. So if your components don't have a select attribute there, if it doesn't have a select attribute, that basically is eligible to be rendered into an ng content. Only if you have a select, that you like specifically telling I want to select this particular from this particular markup, I would render the content. And it's also important to note that ng container element is a logical construct that is used to group other DOM elements. However, ng container itself is not rendered in the DOM tree. So basically, if you will see the actual output in your element after its render, you will not find an ng container tag there, because it says that it is element which is logical construct and it is used to group the elements. We achieve with ng container is that we can pass a multiple tags or a group of a particular markup content inside ng container. So that was all about the content projection, and I hope you may find this video helpful. Thank you.